The reflection of crystal chandeliers danced across the polished marble floor of Sterling Tower's grand ballroom. Boston's elite mingled in their finery champagne flutes, catching the light, while soft jazz melodies drifted through the air. CEO Elizabeth Chen moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her midnight blue gown, a stark contrast against the sea of black tuxedos. To the casual observer, she appeared the epitome of confidence, the brilliant mind behind NextSec Technologies, one of the nation's leading cybersecurity firms. Only her assistant Mia noticed the tension in Elizabeth's shoulders, the way her fingers tightened around her champagne stem when she scanned the entrance. "They're here for me," Elizabeth whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the gala. Mia followed her gaze to where three men in immaculate dark suits entered through the main doors. Their movements were too fluid, too purposeful. Predators among prey. Across the ballroom, David Turner knelt beside his daughter Lucy, adjusting the collar of her small dress. She fidgeted with the sketchbook in her lap, clearly uncomfortable, surrounded by such opulence. "Just a few more hours, sweetheart, then we'll grab pizza on the way home. Extra cheese." David's smile was gentle, his work-roughened hands a stark contrast to the delicate origami crane Lucy had folded from a cocktail napkin. "I know, Daddy." Lucy's eyes drifted to the glittering crowd. "Why do they all look so serious when they have such pretty things?" David chuckled, the sound warm despite the weariness in his eyes. "Sometimes having things isn't the same as having happiness, Luce." A man in maintenance coveralls approached, nodding respectfully to David. "Mr. Turner, they need help with the AC in the East Wing. The Bryant unit's acting up again." David nodded, rising to his feet. "Stay right here, okay? Color in your book. I'll be back in 20 minutes tops." Lucy nodded solemnly, already reaching for her crayons. "I'll make you something special." As David moved through the service quarter, he couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness that had settled between his shoulder blades. 8 years of civilian life hadn't dulled his instincts. The silver ring on his right hand caught the light as he unconsciously rotated it with his thumb, an old habit from a life he'd left behind. The ballroom buzzed with Boston's power players. Tech entrepreneurs mingled with venture capitalists, while politicians schmoozed with old money. Sterling Tower, with its 68 stories of gleaming steel and glass, stood as a monument to wealth and influence, its penthouse suites among the most exclusive addresses in the city. Tonight's fundraiser had drawn the cream of society, all eager to be seen supporting the charitable foundation that bore Elizabeth Chen's name. At 38, Elizabeth had accomplished more than most people did in a lifetime. The daughter of Chinese immigrants, she'd built NextSec from a dorm room project into a billion-dollar enterprise, securing government contracts that put her small company in direct competition with tech giants. Her software protected everything from nuclear facilities to water treatment plants. The sleek black evening gown and understated diamond earrings projected exactly the image she wanted. Successful but not flashy, powerful but approachable. "I don't like this," Mia murmured, her eyes following the three newcomers. Security didn't flag them. Elizabeth took another sip of champagne, her red lipstick leaving a perfect crescent on the glass. "They wouldn't. Their credentials are impeccable, I'm sure." Her voice hardened, just like the emails. "Whoever's been threatening me knows exactly what they're doing." The tallest of the three men, clearly the leader, caught Elizabeth's eye across the room and offered a slight, knowing nod. He was handsome in a predatory way, his dark hair perfectly styled, his posture military straight. Marcus Reed, former Special Forces, now working for the highest bidder. Elizabeth had done her homework after the first threatening email arrived 3 weeks ago. "We should call the police," Mia insisted, "and tell them what—" "That I have a feeling." Elizabeth shook her head. "We need evidence first." Her fingers instinctively touched the small panic button, disguised as a diamond bracelet charm. "Just stay close." Near the back wall, Lucy hunched over her sketchbook, her small fingers moving carefully across the page. At 9 years old, she already showed remarkable artistic talent, capturing details most children her age would miss. Her dark hair fell in a curtain around her face as she concentrated, occasionally glancing up to study the crowd before returning to her drawing. She didn't notice when a tall man in an expensive suit stopped to look over her shoulder. "That's quite good," the man remarked, his voice carrying the refined accent of old Boston money. "You've captured Mrs. Worthington's scowl perfectly." Lucy looked up, startled. "Thank you, sir," she replied automatically, the way her father had taught her, polite but cautious. William Taylor, real estate magnate and major NextSec investor, studied the child with faint amusement. "And what is a young artist doing alone at this stuffy affair? Shouldn't you be at home with a nanny?" "My daddy works here." Lucy answered, closing her sketchbook protectively. He'll be back soon. Ah, William's interest visibly dimmed. The help. He scanned the room, his gaze dismissive. And what does Daddy do? Before Lucy could answer, a waiter passing with a tray of champagne stumbled slightly, the glasses clinking precariously. Without looking, William thrust his empty glass toward the server, still focused on Lucy. Careful there, he snapped. These shoes cost more than you make in a month. The waiter, a young man with a nervous expression, fumbled with the glass. William's irritation flared as champagne splashed onto his sleeve. For God's sake, can't you people do anything right? From across the room, David emerged from the service entrance, his maintenance uniform standing out starkly among the formal wear. His eyes found Lucy immediately, then narrowed at the scene unfolding before him. He moved with quiet purpose, his steps nearly silent despite his work boots. I'm so sorry, sir, the waiter stammered, reaching for a napkin. William waved him off in disgust. Just get out of my sight before you ruin someone else's evening. His attention returned to Lucy, who had shrunk back in her chair. Well, little one, it seems your father works with equally competent colleagues. The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. Lucy's eyes dropped to her lap, her small shoulders hunching forward. And this is precisely why we need better schools. William continued, addressing another guest who'd wandered over. Children like this with no proper guidance. What future can they possibly expect? His voice carried just enough for those nearby to hear, drawing a few chuckles from the crowd. David arrived at that moment, standing just behind William. His face was carefully neutral, but the tension in his jaw revealed his anger. Lucy's eyes brightened with relief at the sight of her father. Sir David said quietly, excuse me. William turned irritated at the interruption. His gaze swept over David's maintenance uniform with thinly veiled disdain. What is it? That's my daughter you're speaking about. David's voice remained level-controlled. I'd appreciate if you'd move along now. William raised an eyebrow, taking in David's worn work clothes and the next-sec maintenance badge clipped to his breast pocket. Well, well. The janitor arrives. He made no move to step away. Do you know who I am? David's eyes never wavered. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Taylor, and I still need you to move away from my daughter. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the potential drama. William seemed to enjoy the audience, straightening his posture. I was just commenting on the girl's artwork. Quite good, actually. With proper schooling, she might make something of herself. Better than... He gestured vaguely at David's uniform. David's right hand reflexively touched the silver ring on his finger, rotating it once-twice. Lucy, pack up your things, please. His voice was gentle, but left no room for argument. Lucy quickly gathered her sketch pad and crayons, shoving them into her small backpack. William watched with amusement, making no move to step aside. You know, he continued, leaning closer to David, there's a scholarship fund for service staff children, though I suspect it would be wasted in this case. The apple doesn't fall far, does it? A woman in an emerald gown laughed softly. God, could you imagine the janitor's kid at Brighton Academy? Several others joined in their laughter, cutting through the elegant music. Lucy's face flushed with embarrassment, her eyes beginning to water. David remained completely still, his breathing measured. The silver ring rotated a third time under his thumb. William, emboldened by the laughter, raised his freshly acquired champagne glass in mock toast. To the working class, their simple dreams provide such inspiration. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he deliberately poured a splash of champagne onto David's shoulder. Oops, looks like you have a mess to clean up. Isn't that what we pay you for? The room fell silent, the cruelty of the gesture shocking even this jaded crowd. David didn't flinch as the liquid soaked into his uniform. His expression remained unnervingly calm, though something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. A glimpse of someone else entirely. Someone these people would never want to meet. Across the room, Elizabeth had been watching the scene unfold with growing anger. She started forward, intending to intervene when Mia gripped her arm tightly. Ms. Chen, they're moving. Marcus and his men had separated, taking positions around the perimeter of the room. The tactical formation was unmistakable. They're boxing you in. Elizabeth hesitated, torn between addressing William's behavior and dealing with the more immediate threat. Before she could decide, Marcus approached, his smile all teeth and no warmth. Miss Chen, what a pleasure. He extended his hand. We haven't been formally introduced. Marcus Reed, I've long admired your security innovations. Elizabeth accepted the handshake, her grip firm, despite her racing heart. Mr. Reed, I wasn't aware you were on the guest list. I have friends in interesting places, Marcus replied smoothly. Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private. I have a business proposition that I believe will be extremely lucrative for both of us. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Over his shoulder, Elizabeth could see his two associates had positioned themselves near the exits. The tallest one, James Hayes, according to her research, looked uncomfortable, his eyes constantly scanning the room. The third man, Kyle Wilson, kept one hand inside his jacket in a way that suggested he was armed. David watched this interaction while gently guiding Lucy toward the service corridor, away from William and his cronies. Though he kept his body language relaxed, his mind was calculating exits, threat assessments, and potential weapons. Old habits that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan and countless classified operations. "Stay here, sweetheart," David whispered, as he settled Lucy in an alcove near the kitchen. "I need to check something, but I'll be right back. If anyone comes who isn't me, go find Rosa in the kitchen, okay?" Lucy nodded, clutching her backpack. "Is something bad happening, Daddy?" "Just a precaution," David assured her, smoothing her hair. "Remember what I taught you?" Lucy's chin lifted slightly. "Be aware, be smart, be brave." "That's my girl." David pressed a kiss to her forehead before slipping back into the ballroom, moving along the periphery where the shadows were deepest. Elizabeth allowed Marcus to guide her toward a side room, her mind racing through potential scenarios. She'd prepared for this confrontation since discovering the security breach in NextSec's newest software platform, a vulnerability that could give backdoor access to dozens of critical infrastructure systems across the country. The breach was subtle, sophisticated, and deeply embedded, the work of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. As they entered the smaller conference room, Elizabeth noticed James Hayes close the door behind them, remaining near the entrance while Kyle took position by the windows. The tactical positioning wasn't lost on her. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Marcus said, his friendly facade dropping away. "You've discovered our modifications to your security protocols." Elizabeth kept her expression neutral. "You mean your malware designed to compromise nuclear power plant safety systems?" "Yes, I found it." Marcus chuckled. "Always so direct. That's what I admire about you, Elizabeth. You built something remarkable with NextSec. It's a shame you didn't recognize its full potential." "You mean as a weapon?" Elizabeth replied coldly. "That's what you're selling, isn't it? Access to America's critical infrastructure to the highest bidder." Marcus spread his hands in a placating gesture. "The marketplace is global now. National boundaries mean little in the digital age. You could be part of this, Elizabeth. Very wealthy, very quickly. By selling out my country." She shook her head. "Not interested." Marcus's expression hardened. "I'm afraid I wasn't making an offer. We need your access codes and authentication protocols. Tonight." Elizabeth laughed, the sound brittle in the tense room. "You can't be serious. I'm not giving you anything." Kyle stepped forward, opening his jacket enough to reveal the pistol holstered against his ribs. Marcus's smile turned predatory. "I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. We already have access to most of your systems. Your authentication is the final piece." Elizabeth's mind raced. She needed to stall to find a way out. "How did you do it? The encryption should have been unbreakable." "We had help from inside NextSec," James offered from his position by the door, speaking for the first time. His voice held a note of regret that Marcus clearly didn't share. Marcus shot him an irritated glance before turning back to Elizabeth. "Someone very close to you, actually. Someone who knows all your secrets." The revelation hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. Only a handful of people had access to the core security architecture. All people she'd personally vetted, trusted. The betrayal stung worse than the threat. "You have 10 minutes to decide," Elizabeth, Marcus continued. "Either you cooperate willingly, or Kyle here will escort you to your home office, where you'll cooperate under duress. Your choice." David moved silently through the service corridor, years of special operations training, allowing him to navigate undetected. He'd noticed the 3 men the moment they entered. Their bearing, positioning, and constant communication marked them as professionals, likely ex-military. The way they'd targeted Elizabeth Chen confirmed his suspicions that this was more than a social event. He entered the maintenance closet using his key card to access the small locker he'd installed when he first took the job at Sterling Tower. Inside was a compact tactical kit. Nothing obvious, just tools that would raise no alarms if discovered: a reinforced flashlight, zip ties, a multi-tool, and a small medical kit. Old habits died hard, and David had learned long ago to prepare for contingencies. As he gathered what he needed, his mind replayed the scene with William Taylor. The man's casual cruelty toward Lucy had awakened something David had worked hard to suppress: the cold calculating operator who had once been known only as Phantom. 8 years of civilian life had softened his edges, but the core of steel remained forged through battles most people couldn't imagine. David closed the locker and slipped back into the corridor, his movements fluid and purposeful now. He wasn't just a maintenance worker anymore. He was a hunter tracking his prey. Inside the conference room, Elizabeth fought to keep her composure. She needed time, needed help. Her hand moved discreetly to the panic button on her bracelet. "Don't," Kyle warned, noticing the movement. "We've already jammed all signals in and out of this room. No one's coming to help." Marcus checked his watch. 8 minutes remaining, Elizabeth. "I admire your principles, but surely they're not worth dying for." He nodded to Kyle, who drew his weapon and removed the silencer from his pocket. James shifted uncomfortably. "This wasn't the plan, Marcus. We were supposed to pressure her on." "Plans change." Marcus cut him off. "We have a narrow window here. The client wants access tonight, and they're paying premium rates for it." Elizabeth glared at them defiantly. "You're making a mistake. Even if I give you what you want, you'll never get away with this. There are too many people who would notice." Marcus laughed. "Notice what a CEO who sold access to her own systems for profit then had regrets. Or perhaps a tragic accident befalling a successful woman who worked too hard. The narratives write themselves, Elizabeth." Outside in the hallway, David had identified the security system for the conference room, a standard electronic lock he'd repaired just last month. He knew its vulnerabilities, had memorized the override codes as a matter of habit. Old training kicking in, preparing for contingencies no one else would consider. He approached silently, catching fragments of conversation through the door. The voices confirmed his suspicions. This was a professional operation with serious intent. David weighed his options. He could call security, but if these men were as well connected as they seemed, that might only escalate the situation. He could walk away, protect Lucy, keep his cover intact, stay invisible, as he had for 8 years. The thought lasted only a moment before he dismissed it. He couldn't abandon anyone to these predators, not when he had the skills to intervene. Lucy was safe for now, and this woman needed help more urgently. David took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless operations. The maintenance worker receded and Phantom emerged from the shadows of memory, cool, calculated, and lethally efficient. He entered the security code, waited for the faint click, and opened the door. 4 heads turned as David stepped into the conference room, still wearing his stained maintenance uniform. His posture had changed subtly, shoulders squared, weight balanced, hands relaxed but ready. Nothing about him resembled the humble janitor William Taylor had mocked minutes earlier. Kyle reacted first, swinging his weapon toward the unexpected intruder. Marcus recovered quickly from his surprise, his expression shifting from shock to irritation. "Get out," he snapped. "This area is off limits for cleaning." David closed the door behind him, his eyes quickly scanning the room, noting positions, threats, potential weapons. His gaze settled briefly on Elizabeth, assessing her condition before returning to Marcus. "I think Miss Chen needs to return to the gala." David said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of authority that hadn't been present before. His Boston accent had vanished, replaced by precise, measured speech. Kyle kept his weapon trained on David. Marcus raised an eyebrow, amused rather than concerned. The janitor playing hero. He chuckled, glancing at his companions. "This evening is full of surprises." James Hayes studied David more carefully, his expression shifting from dismissal to uncertainty. There was something familiar about the maintenance man's stance, the way he had positioned himself in the room. Small details that triggered warning bells in James's subconscious. "Last chance," David said quietly. "Let her go and we can all walk away from this." Marcus laughed outright. "Or what? You'll mop us to death." He nodded to Kyle. "Get rid of him. Nothing permanent. Just enough to keep him quiet until we're done here." Kyle advanced confidently, tucking his gun away, in favor of handling this barehanded. A simple intimidation job, nothing requiring lethal force. He was a large man, well-trained in close combat, with at least 40 pounds of advantage over the maintenance worker. David didn't move as Kyle approached, his expression unchanged. Only his right hand shifted slightly, the silver ring catching the light as he rotated it once more with his thumb. Kyle lunged forward, reaching to grab David's collar. What happened next occurred so quickly that Elizabeth barely processed the sequence of movements. David sidestepped with liquid grace, one hand deflecting Kyle's arm, while the other struck with surgical precision at the nerve cluster in his attacker's shoulder. Kyle's arm went numb instantly, his momentum carrying him past David, who completed the movement with a precise strike to the back of Kyle's knee. Kyle collapsed to the ground, gasping in shock and pain, as David smoothly relieved him of his weapon, ejecting the magazine and clearing the chamber in one practice motion before tossing the pieces in opposite directions. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds. James Hayes froze his eyes, widening in recognition as he finally placed where he'd seen those movements before, in classified combat footage from operations he'd studied during his military training. Combat techniques reserved for elite special forces units. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That ring." James's gaze fixed on the silver band on David's right hand, simple, unadorned except for a series of numbers and letters engraved in a pattern only someone with specific clearance would recognize. A military code designating a unit so classified that most government officials didn't know it existed. "It can't be," James breathed. "You're dead. The file said you were dead." Marcus turned sharply to James, confused by his reaction. "What the hell are you talking about?" James had gone pale, his hand moving away from his concealed weapon. "That's Commander Turner. That's Phantom." The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Marcus's confident expression faltered as he studied David more carefully. Recognition slowly dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief. "Bullshit," he spat, though his voice lacked conviction. "Phantom died in that IED blast 8 years ago. Closed casket funeral at Arlington. I was there." David remained perfectly still, his expression neutral. His silence was more unnerving than any denial would have been. Elizabeth watched this exchange with growing confusion, not understanding the significance, but recognizing the sudden shift in power dynamics. The maintenance worker, David Turner, had transformed before her eyes into someone else entirely, someone these trained operatives clearly feared. Kyle struggled to his feet, cradling his injured arm, his face contorted with pain and anger. "You son of a—" One look from David silenced him mid-sentence. James took a small step back toward the door. "If he's who I think he is, we need to leave. Now, this isn't worth it." Marcus hesitated, his confidence visibly wavering as he reassessed the situation. The man before him bore little resemblance to the legendary operative he'd heard about during his military career. The ghost who led impossible missions, who extracted hostages from compounds deemed impenetrable, whose team had never lost a man despite odds that should have been fatal. Yet something in David's stance, in the cold calculation behind his eyes, made Marcus's combat instincts scream danger. This was not a janitor who had gotten lucky with one takedown. This was a predator who had been hiding in plain sight. "You're outnumbered," Marcus said, attempting to regain control of the situation. 3 against 1. David's expression didn't change. "I've never needed favorable odds to do my job." The simple statement carried such quiet certainty that even Marcus took an involuntary step back. "I'm out," James announced, suddenly raising his hands. "I didn't sign up for this." His gaze met David's. "Sir, I served under Colonel Hayes in the 10th Group. He told stories about your unit, about Kandahar." He lowered his voice. "You saved his life and everyone in his team." David gave an almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, but his focus remained on Marcus, who still presented the greatest threat. Marcus's hand inched toward his concealed weapon. "You're making a mistake, Hayes." "The only mistake was thinking we could threaten a woman under his protection," James replied, still backing toward the door. "The stories about him. Trust me, you don't want this fight." In the tense silence that followed, the door burst open as Sean Collins, head of Sterling Towers Security, entered with 2 guards. He assessed the situation quickly, noting Kyle's injured state and the tension in the room. His gaze settled on David, narrowing in confusion. "Mr. Turner, what's happening here?" His hand moved to his sidearm. David remained calm. "These gentlemen were just leaving Sean. Ms. Chen is fine, but they've overstayed their welcome." Sean looked uncertain, glancing between David and Marcus. Something about David's demeanor made him hesitate, some subtle shift in authority that he couldn't quite place. Then Sean's eyes caught the silver ring on David's hand, and his military training ticked in. Recognition dawned in his expression, followed by shock, and then something approaching awe. "Commander Turner, sir." His voice had changed completely, the respectful tone of a soldier addressing a superior officer. "Is that really you?" David gave a slight nod, his expression revealing nothing. Sean immediately straightened, his entire demeanor transforming. "Detain these men," he ordered his security team, gesturing to Marcus and Kyle. "Carefully." The security guards moved forward, but Marcus wasn't ready to surrender. In a swift motion, he drew his weapon and grabbed Elizabeth, pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Nobody moves," he shouted, pressing the gun to Elizabeth's temple. "We're walking out of here now." Elizabeth remained remarkably composed, her eyes meeting David's across the room. In that brief exchange, something unspoken passed between them. Trust from a stranger that somehow felt earned. David hadn't moved, his posture relaxed despite the escalation. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but carried effortlessly through the room. "There are two ways this ends, Marcus. You put down the gun and walk out in handcuffs, or you don't walk out at all." His tone made it clear which option he preferred. Marcus laughed nervously, tightening his grip on Elizabeth. "I have the hostage. I make the terms." David's expression shifted subtly, not anger, but something colder, more clinical. "You made a critical error in your assessment." "What's that?" Marcus sneered, backing toward the door with Elizabeth. "You assumed I needed a weapon to stop you." Before Marcus could process those words, Elizabeth moved. The self-defense training she'd insisted on taking after her company's success hadn't been wasted. She drove her elbow hard into Marcus's solar plexus while simultaneously twisting away from the gun. The momentary distraction was all David needed. He closed the distance between them with frightening speed, his movements fluid and precise. One hand diverted the weapon while the other struck Marcus's wrist with calculated force. The gun clattered to the floor as Marcus gasped in pain, his hands suddenly useless. David completed the takedown with mechanical efficiency, using Marcus's own momentum to drive him to the ground. He secured him with practiced ease, applying just enough pressure to immobilize without causing permanent damage. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. The room fell silent except for Marcus's labored breathing. Elizabeth stared at David in stunned appreciation while Sean and his team rushed forward to take custody of the subdued men. James Hayes had made no move to flee or fight, his hands still raised in surrender. His gaze remained fixed on David with a mixture of fear and respect. "I didn't know, sir, about the threats to Ms. Chen. I was told this was corporate espionage, not—" He trailed off, unable to find the right words. David acknowledged this with a slight nod as he rose to his feet, straightening his maintenance uniform with the same careful precision he'd just displayed in combat. The transformation was jarring. One moment a lethal operative, the next a humble janitor, again though the illusion could never be fully restored. Sean approached David tentatively, still processing what he'd witnessed. "Sir, I served 2 tours in Iraq before joining private security. The stories about Phantom—" He shook his head in disbelief. "They said you could walk through hell and come back unburned. That you never lost a man." David's expression revealed nothing. "Call the police, Sean. These men will have interesting stories to tell them." The security team escorted Marcus and Kyle out with James following, voluntarily, still visibly shaken by the revelation of David's identity. When they were alone, Elizabeth studied David with new eyes. "You're not just maintenance staff, are you?" A ghost of a smile touched David's lips. "Today I am. That's all that matters." Elizabeth wasn't satisfied with this non-answer. "Those men knew you. They were terrified of you. Who is Phantom?" David glanced toward the door. "I need to check on my daughter." He turned to leave, but Elizabeth's voice stopped him. "Thank you for intervening when you didn't have to." David looked back at her, his expression softening slightly. 8 years ago, I swore an oath to protect. Some promises don't expire with discharge papers." With that cryptic statement, he left to find Lucy, leaving Elizabeth with more questions than answers. In the main ballroom, word had spread quickly that something had happened involving the maintenance worker who'd been humiliated earlier. Guests whispered among themselves as police officers arrived, taking statements from security personnel near the entrance. David found Lucy exactly where he'd left her, coloring peacefully in her sketchbook. He knelt beside her, checking her over with a parent's worried eyes. "Everything okay, Daddy?" she asked, searching his face. David smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Everything's fine now, sweetheart, but I think we might need a rain check on that pizza. I need to talk to some police officers first." Lucy nodded solemnly, accepting this change of plans, with the resilience of a child who had learned to be adaptable. She held up her drawing for him to see, a surprisingly detailed sketch of the ballroom with tiny figures representing the guests. In the corner, she'd drawn her father standing tall, a subtle glow around him that suggested something special, something heroic. "That's beautiful, Luce," David said softly, his throat tightening with emotion. "I drew you how you really are," she explained simply, "not how they see you." David gathered her into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of his child. In that moment, the years of hiding, of bearing his past, seemed worth it for this one perfect connection. Their moment was interrupted as Sean approached, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Commander Turner," he said, still using the military title with reverence. The police need your statement. David nodded, standing with Lucy's hand firmly in his. As they walked toward the officers, they passed William Taylor, who stood watching with a confused expression, trying to reconcile the janitor he'd humiliated with the man now being treated with deference by security and police alike. The ballroom had grown quiet, the elegant crowd parting as David and Lucy passed through. Some guests whispered behind their hands, others stared openly, but the mockery had vanished, replaced by uncertainty, and from some, a dawning respect. Elizabeth Chen approached, her composure fully restored, despite the ordeal she'd just endured. "Mr. Turner," she addressed him formally, though her eyes conveyed deeper understanding. "I've informed the police that you acted to protect me when these men threatened my safety. They'll need details, of course." "Of course," David replied simply. Elizabeth knelt to Lucy's level, her smile genuine. "And you must be the artist I've heard about. I'd love to see your work sometime." Lucy beamed, clutching her sketchbook tighter. "I'm Lucy. My daddy says I have a good eye for detail." "I'm sure you do," Elizabeth agreed, rising to meet David's gaze again. "Like father, like daughter, I suspect." The comment carried layers of meaning that weren't lost on David. He nodded in acknowledgement, but offered nothing more. As they continued toward the police, William Taylor stepped into their path. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by confusion and a growing horror as he pieced together the fragments of conversation around him. I didn't know," he stammered, looking at David with new eyes. "They're saying that you were—" David's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Taylor." The simple acknowledgement carried no forgiveness, no anger, just recognition of the man's existence before David guided Lucy past him. William called after them, his voice strained. "That scholarship I mentioned, for your daughter. It would be an honor if—" David paused, turning back with calm deliberation. "My daughter's future is secure, Mr. Taylor, but your apology might mean more to the young server you berated earlier. His dignity matters just as much as mine." With that parting wisdom, David continued forward, leaving William speechless in his wake. The message was clear. True respect wasn't selective, bestowed only on those with impressive titles or hidden pasts. It was universal, earned through character rather than credentials. As David gave his statement to the police, carefully omitting classified details, while providing enough information to ensure Marcus and his team faced justice, he noticed the subtle shift in how people looked at him. The invisibility he'd cultivated for 8 years had been stripped away in an instant. He was seen now, not just as David Turner, maintenance worker, but as someone whose presence commanded respect. The transformation brought both relief and regret. His carefully constructed life would need to change again. The question was how much of his past he would allow to reclaim his future. Hours later, after the police had finished their questions and the gala had mostly emptied, David sat with Lucy in the security office, waiting for final clearance to leave. Elizabeth Chen entered, having changed from her evening gown into more practical attire. Slacks and a simple blouse that somehow looked equally elegant. "They're charging them with attempted kidnapping, extortion, and corporate espionage," she informed David, taking the seat opposite him. Reed had connections to a hacker group based overseas. They've been targeting defense contractors for months. David nodded, unsurprised. The operation had been too well planned to be isolated. Lucy had fallen asleep against his shoulder, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. Elizabeth smiled at the sight. "She's beautiful," she observed softly. "You've done well with her." "She's everything," David replied, simply adjusting his arm to make Lucy more comfortable. Elizabeth studied him thoughtfully. "You know, NEXEC has an opening in our security division. The hours are regular, 9 to 5. The pay is significantly better than maintenance work. And we have excellent benefits, including college savings plans." David met her gaze evenly. "I'm not looking for charity, Miss Chen." Elizabeth's eyes flashed. "It's not charity, it's recognition of skill. Whatever you did before, whoever you were, those abilities are valuable. My company protects critical infrastructure from people like Reed. We could use someone with your perspective." David considered this in silence, his free hand absently turning the silver ring on his finger. For 8 years, he'd avoided anything connected to his former life, determined to give Lucy the stability and safety he'd never had as a child. But tonight had proven that the skills of his past could protect his present, could perhaps build a better future. "I'll think about it," he finally responded. Elizabeth nodded, accepting this as the most she would get tonight. She rose to leave, but paused at the door. "Your daughter asked me something while you were speaking with the police." David raised an eyebrow in question. "She wanted to know if I was scared when that man grabbed me." Elizabeth continued. I told her I was, but that I kept thinking about how brave her father was stepping into danger to help a stranger. She said she wasn't surprised, that you always taught her to stand up for people who need help, even when it's hard. She looked at David with newfound respect. That's quite a legacy, Commander Turner. Perhaps more important than the one you left behind. With those words, she left David alone with his sleeping daughter and the weight of possibilities before him. He gazed down at Lucy, her peaceful expression, a stark contrast to the chaos of the evening. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in years, David allowed himself to consider that perhaps he didn't need to choose between his past skills and his present life, that the right balance might allow him to honor both. Outside the window, Boston's skyline glittered against the night sky, Sterling Tower standing proudly among the lights. David Turner, father maintenance worker, former ghost, held his daughter close and began planning their next chapter. The Sterling Tower security office buzzed with activity as dawn approached. David sat with Lucy curled against his side, her small body finally relaxed in sleep after the tension of the night. Through the glass walls, he watched detectives interrogating Marcus Reed and Kyle Wilson in separate rooms, while James Hayes cooperated quietly with authorities, his military bearing evident even in surrender. Sean Collins approached with 2 cups of steaming coffee, offering one to David. I pulled your file after what happened. Maintenance supervisor for 3 years, perfect attendance, exceptional performance reviews. Before that, nothing. It's like you appeared out of nowhere. David accepted the coffee without comment, his eyes never leaving Lucy's peaceful face. Commander Sean persisted, lowering his voice. Your actions saved lives tonight, but they've also compromised your situation. Word is spreading. There were at least 50 witnesses in that ballroom, and Boston PD isn't exactly known for discretion. The faint light of dawn filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the office. David gently shifted Lucy to a more comfortable position. I appreciate your concerns, Sean. We'll manage. Sean hesitated before continuing. Sir, I served under Colonel Mackenzie in Helmand. He spoke of you once after a particularly rough operation. Said there was a guardian angel watching over special operators in the worst situations. Someone Washington would call when the impossible needed doing. David's expression remained neutral, neither confirming nor denying. The past stays in the past, Sean. I'm just maintenance staff who happen to be in the right place. Sean nodded, understanding the dismissal. Still, sir, my team and I were at your disposal if you need anything at all. As Sean departed, David checked his watch. Nearly 6 in the morning. Lucy would need breakfast soon, a shower, something resembling normalcy after the chaos. His thumb unconsciously rotated the silver ring as he calculated his next moves. The careful anonymity he'd cultivated was unraveling rapidly. Soon questions would follow from people far more dangerous than Sean Collins. An officer approached, informing David they were free to leave. As he gathered Lucy in his arms, his gaze met Elizabeth Chen's across the security office. She had remained throughout the night, coordinating with authorities, her composure never faltering despite the ordeal. Something passed between them, an unspoken understanding, a recognition of shared burden. Elizabeth nodded once before turning back to her conversation with the lead detective. Outside, morning light spilled across Boston's financial district. David carried Lucy to the employee parking area, her weight familiar and comforting against his chest. The city was beginning to stir, unaware of the night's drama. The near catastrophe averted the past unearthed. 3 blocks away, in an upscale hotel suite, William Taylor stared at his laptop screen, scanning news reports about a disrupted kidnapping attempt at Sterling Tower. The articles mentioned little about the maintenance worker who had intervened, focusing instead on the quick response of security personnel. But William knew what he had seen, the transformation of a seemingly ordinary janitor into something lethal and precise. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he debated making a call to his contacts in Washington. David pulled into this driveway of their modest 2-bedroom apartment in Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood far from the gleaming towers of downtown. Lucy stirred as he cut the engine, her eyes blinking open in the morning light. Are we home, Daddy? He nodded, helping her from the car. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a well-maintained but aging building. Affordable, inconspicuous, practical. Inside, the space revealed a life carefully constructed around Lucy's needs. Her artwork covered the refrigerator, and one wall of the living room, a dedicated creative space occupying the corner by the largest window. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with everything from picture books to advanced texts on engineering, medicine, and history. evidence of David's commitment to nurturing her curious mind. Lucy headed straight for the bathroom, the routine of their morning unaffected by the night's extraordinary events. David moved to the kitchen, preparing breakfast while listening for her movements, a habit born from years of hypervigilance, impossible to break even in this safe space. As oatmeal simmered on the stove, he retrieved a locked metal case from behind the water heater access panel. The combination came automatically to his fingers, revealing contents he hadn't examined in years. A satellite phone, multiple passports with his photograph, but different names, several bundles of cash in various currencies, and a sealed envelope marked with a series of numbers rather than a name. His training had taught him to always have contingencies. 8 years of peace hadn't erased the protocols that had kept him alive through decades of clandestine operations. Lucy emerged from the bathroom, hair damp from the shower, dressed in fresh clothes. "Hungry, Daddy?" David returned the case to its hiding place before she could see it. "Oatmeal with honey and berries. Your favorite." As they ate breakfast, Lucy studied her father's face with the perceptive gaze that sometimes made him wonder if she'd inherited more than just his features. Those men last night, they were bad people. David considered his response carefully. They wanted to hurt Ms. Chen and steal something valuable from her company, something that could harm a lot of people if used wrongly. Lucy nodded, absorbing this information with remarkable composure for a 9-year-old. "And you stopped them, like a superhero but without the cape." A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Not a superhero, Luce. Just someone who knew what to do in a tough situation." Lucy stirred her oatmeal thoughtfully. "Mr. Taylor was really mean. But after the police came, he looked at you differently, like he was scared." David's expression sobered. "Sometimes people judge others based on what they can see on the outside, like a uniform or a job title. It's not fair, but it happens." She nodded sagely. "Like how my art teacher didn't think I could draw a perspective until I showed her my city sketches." Exactly like that. The conversation paused as David's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered cautiously, listening more than speaking. "I understand. Yes, she'll be with me. 1 hour." He ended the call, meeting Lucy's questioning gaze. "We need to go back downtown. The police have some more questions, and Ms. Chen wants to talk with us too." Lucy brightened at the mention of Elizabeth. "I like her. She didn't talk to me like I was a baby." David nodded absently, his mind already calculating potential risks, escape routes, contingencies. Old habits resurging with the crisis, the protective instincts of both warrior and father merging into something vigilant and unyielding. Across town, Elizabeth Chen sat in her corner office at Nexec Technologies headquarters, a modernist glass and steel structure overlooking Boston Harbor. The early morning sunlight glinted off the water, creating patterns across her desk as she reviewed security footage from Sterling Tower. She paused the video on a frame showing David Turner in action. The fluid economy of his movements, the absolute precision, the controlled violence that spoke of years of specialized training. Mia entered with a file folder. "You were right. There's nothing on David Turner before 2017. No social security records, no military service under that name, not even a driver's license. He appeared out of nowhere with a 9-month-old daughter, imperfect documentation that somehow doesn't exist in any federal database." Elizabeth stared at the frozen image on her screen, and the name they called him, Phantom. Mia hesitated. "That's complicated. There are rumors in military intelligence circles about a special operations unit that didn't officially exist. No paperwork, no acknowledgement, complete deniability. They handled missions too sensitive for even Delta or SEAL Team 6. The operatives were referred to by code names, only their real identities classified beyond top secret." Elizabeth turned from the screen, and one of them was called Phantom, supposedly the unit commander. A ghost story told in forward operating bases, the operative who could infiltrate anywhere, extract anyone, eliminate any threat. The stories claimed he never failed a mission, never lost a team member. Elizabeth's expression remained thoughtful. "Stories tend to grow in the telling." Mia nodded. "True, but I spoke with a contact at the Pentagon this morning. He wouldn't confirm anything specific, but he did say that if someone matching Turner's description had resurfaced in Boston, several agencies would be very interested and concerned." The implications hung in the air between them. Elizabeth swiveled her chair to face the harbor, the sleek vessels cutting through the morning waters. The digital vulnerability Reed had tried to exploit was only part of a larger problem, one that might reach deeper into her company than she initially suspected. "I want complete background checks on every employee with system access. And get me everything you can on Marcus Reed's known associates, especially anyone who might have connections to NextSec. Mia nodded, turning to leave before pausing at the door. Turner and his daughter will be here in 30 minutes. Are you sure this is a good idea? Elizabeth's gaze remained fixed on the harbor. If I'm right about who David Turner is, or was, we need him. And after last night, he needs us too. He just doesn't know it yet. David and Lucy arrived at NextSec headquarters precisely on time. The security staff treated them with a deference that made David uncomfortable, too reminiscent of how soldiers had once responded to his presence in the field. The hushed conversations, the straightened postures, the respectful distance, all signals that word had spread about the incident at Sterling Tower. The executive elevator whisked them to the top floor where Mia greeted them and escorted them to Elizabeth's office. The space was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Boston minimalist furnishings in glass and steel cutting-edge technology seamlessly integrated into the design. Lucy's eyes widened as she took it all in, particularly drawn to a holographic display showing real-time cybersecurity metrics across a global map. Elizabeth rose from behind her desk, dressed in a charcoal suit that projected authority without sacrificing femininity. Welcome to NextSec. Thank you for coming. Her smile softened as she addressed Lucy directly. I've set up something special for you while your father and I talk. How would you feel about visiting our design lab? We're working on some new animation software that needs testing by someone with an artistic eye. Lucy looked to David for permission, barely containing her excitement. He nodded, and a young woman appeared to escort her to the lab. Through the glass walls, David watched until they disappeared into an elevator before turning his full attention to Elizabeth. The atmosphere shifted immediately, professionalism replacing the brief warmth. Elizabeth gestured to the sitting area with its commanding view of the harbor. I prefer to have difficult conversations in comfortable settings. They settled into ergonomically designed chairs as Elizabeth pressed a button, frosting the glass walls for privacy. Marcus Reed and his associates have been formally charged, but they're maintaining connections to a larger organization, a cyber mercenary group selling access to critical infrastructure to the highest bidder. David's expression revealed nothing. You didn't invite me here to share information the police already provided. Elizabeth's lips curved in appreciation of his directness. No, I didn't. The truth is, NextSec has a security problem that goes beyond what happened last night. Reed mentioned an insider, someone with high-level access to our systems. I need to find that person before they compromise national security, and I need to do it without alerting them. She paused, studying his reaction. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. NextSec's newest security protocol doesn't just protect corporate networks. It's being implemented across 16 critical infrastructure sectors: nuclear facilities, water treatment plants, power grids, air traffic control systems. The vulnerability Reed was trying to exploit would create backdoor access to all of them, simultaneously. David absorbed this information with the calculated assessment of someone accustomed to weighing strategic threats. Why tell me you have resources connections in federal agencies? Elizabeth leaned forward slightly, because I think the insider might have those same connections. This vulnerability wasn't accidental. It was engineered with sophisticated knowledge of both our system architecture and federal security protocols. That suggests someone with a very specific background. The implication hung between them. Someone with security clearance, someone with access to both worlds. I need someone operating outside official channels, Elizabeth continued. Someone whose skills and judgment I can trust, but who isn't connected to any agency that might be compromised. David's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced through scenarios evaluating angles and risks. Last night wasn't coincidental, was it? You recognized me before Reed ever mentioned Phantom. A faint smile acknowledged his perception. Let's say I had suspicions. Your personnel file contains small inconsistencies that most people wouldn't notice. Perfect documentation that was just a little too perfect. And occasionally, when you thought no one was watching you, moved differently than a maintenance worker should. Her gaze dropped to the silver ring on his finger. Plus, military operators tend to keep totems, something to ground them between worlds. David's thumb instinctively touched the ring before he caught himself silently acknowledging her observation. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Chen? Elizabeth Chen met his gaze directly. I want to hire you as a security consultant to find our mole. Officially, you'll be joining our physical security team. Regular hours, excellent benefits, salary commensurate with your unique qualifications. Unofficially, you'll help me identify whoever compromised my company and tried to weaponize our technology. David considered her offer, weighing it against the rapidly diminishing alternatives. His cover was already compromised. It would only be a matter of time before others connected the dots, including people he'd spent 8 years avoiding. At least this way he controlled some variables. And if I refused, Elizabeth's expression remained open, honest. Then you walk out that door with no obligations. But within 48 hours, your face will be in multiple federal databases as agencies piece together what happened at Sterling Tower. Former operators with your particular skill set don't simply reappear without causing ripples, Commander Turner. The use of his former rank wasn't lost on David. Whatever cover I established is already compromised. Elizabeth nodded. I'm offering you a new one that acknowledges your skills without exposing your past. NextSec can provide legitimacy, resources, and protection for both you and Lucy. At the mention of his daughter, David's resolve hardened. Lucy's safety is non-negotiable. She stays out of this completely. Absolutely, Elizabeth agreed. Her school routine continues undisturbed. In fact, I took the liberty of researching educational options near our campus. Brighton Academy has an exceptional arts program and significant scholarship opportunities for employees' children. David's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of Brighton, the same exclusive school William Taylor had mockingly referenced the night before. Elizabeth recognized her misstep immediately. Forgive me, that was presumptuous. Wherever Lucy attends school is entirely your decision. My point is that working with us provides options, security, and the resources to protect what matters most to you. David stood, moving to the window to observe the harbor activity below. Vessels following established patterns, commercial and recreational craft, navigating shared waters with different purposes, but common rules. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. I'll need complete autonomy to investigate as I see fit. No bureaucracy, no committees, no oversight that might tip off our target. Elizabeth joined him at the window. Agreed. You'll report directly to me with access to whatever resources you require. David turned to face her. 1 week. I'll give you 1 week starting tomorrow. If the arrangement doesn't work, we part ways with no further obligations. Elizabeth extended her hand. Welcome to NextSec, Mr. Turner. Their handshake sealed more than a business arrangement. It marked David's conscious step back into a world he'd abandoned 8 years earlier. The decision settled over him with familiar weight, a burden he'd once carried across continents and through countless operations. Only this time he wasn't a ghost operating in shadows. He had Lucy to consider, a life he'd built that now stood at risk. Across the city, in a federal building downtown, Special Agent Thomas Reeves reviewed the initial reports from Boston PD about the Sterling Tower incident. 23 years with the FBI had honed his instincts, and something about this case triggered alarm bells. The description of how the maintenance worker had neutralized trained operatives matched techniques taught to very specific military units. His phone rang, a secure line from Langley. He answered with practiced efficiency, listening more than speaking. By the time the call ended, his suspicions were confirmed. Someone very important had resurfaced, someone whose file contained more redactions than actual information. Reeves gathered his credentials and weapon, heading for the elevator. The CIA might have their own interest in this case, but national security threats on American soil fell squarely within FBI jurisdiction. And if David Turner was indeed the operative formerly known as Phantom, his reappearance after 8 years raised critical questions about why he'd chosen now to emerge from hiding. In NextSec's design lab, Lucy Turner leaned over a digital drawing tablet, her small hand moving confidently across the surface as she tested the company's prototype animation software. The young developer watched in amazement as Lucy intuitively navigated features that had confounded adult testers. This is amazing. Lucy's eyes shone with excitement as her simple sketch of a bird transformed into a fluid animation that soared across the screen. Can it do backgrounds too? The developer nodded, demonstrating how to create layered environments that responded to the animated figure's movements. Lucy absorbed the instructions instantly, adding clouds that parted as her bird flew through them, then a cityscape that reflected Boston's distinctive skyline. As she worked, Lucy remained unaware of the security officer positioned discreetly near the lab entrance, placed there at Elizabeth's instruction to ensure the child's safety while her father contemplated a decision that would affect both their lives. David examined the office Elizabeth had assigned him, A corner space on the executive floor with sufficient privacy for sensitive conversations, but transparent enough to appear as nothing more than a standard corporate security position. The technical equipment was state-of-the-art, the access badge clipped to his jacket, providing entry to virtually every area of the building. He methodically surveyed the space for surveillance devices, a habit ingrained through years of operating in hostile territories. Finding none, he began reviewing the personnel files Elizabeth had provided, every employee with top-level system access to NextSec's security architecture. 23 names, 23 potential moles who might have deliberately compromised systems protecting America's most vulnerable infrastructure. The familiar rhythm of intelligence analysis returned easily, his mind categorizing suspects, identifying patterns, evaluating motivations and opportunities. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. Mia entered, her professional demeanor masking the curiosity he sensed beneath her surface. "Ms. Chen asked me to provide whatever assistance you require, Mr. Turner. I've been her chief of staff for 4 years and have access to all company records." David studied her carefully. In his experience, executive assistants often knew more about organizational dynamics than their bosses. "How well do you know the people on this list?" Mia stepped closer, examining the profiles displayed on his screen. "Most of them I see daily. Our Chief Technology Officer, Robert Chen, Elizabeth's brother, heads the security protocol team. The others are senior developers, system architects, network engineers. Family connection. Interesting." David noted this without comment. Anyone having financial troubles? Unusual behavior recently, unexplained absences. Mia considered the question thoughtfully. Diane Mercer just went through a difficult divorce. Financial settlement hit her hard. And Kevin Phillips has been acting strangely the past month, missing meetings, working odd hours. But he's always been eccentric, even by programmer standards. David nodded, absorbing these details while revealing nothing of his own assessment. "Thank you. I'd like to observe the team in their natural environment, see how they interact. Can you arrange a tour of the development floor as the new security consultant evaluating physical access protocols?" Mia nodded. "I'll set it up for this afternoon." "One other thing you should know. Robert Chen doesn't appreciate interference in his department. He's brilliant but territorial, especially when it comes to the security protocols. He designed most of the architecture himself." Another note in David's mental file: potential friction with the CTO, who happened to be his new boss's brother. Family dynamics always complicated security investigations. After Mia left, David continued analyzing personnel files, building psychological profiles based on employment histories, performance reviews, and financial records. His attention lingered on Robert Chen's file, MIT graduate recruited by the NSA directly from college, 5 years at the Pentagon before joining his sister's company as CTO. The kind of background that provided both the technical expertise and governmental connections necessary to create a sophisticated backdoor. Elizabeth appeared at his door, now dressed more casually in a designer blazer over jeans. Still professional but approachable. "Lucy's having the time of her life in the design lab. We might have a future NextSec employee on our hands." David acknowledged this with a slight nod. She adapts quickly to new environments. Always has. Elizabeth entered, closing the door behind her. "Finding anything useful?" 23 suspects with the necessary access and expertise. I'll need to observe them interacting, assess behavioral indicators, evaluate potential motivations. Elizabeth perched on the edge of his desk, her proximity a subtle assertion of authority within her domain. "I've arranged for you to join our executive security team officially. The cover story is that after the Sterling Tower incident, I've hired additional personal security with cybersecurity expertise, someone who can evaluate both physical and digital threats." David's expression betrayed nothing but his mind calculated how this role might provide access while maintaining a plausible explanation for his presence. "Your brother is on my suspect list." He delivered this information directly, watching for her reaction. Elizabeth didn't flinch, her composure unwavering. "I expected as much. Robert has the skill set and access, but he's also the person who first identified the vulnerability and brought it to my attention." "Which could be misdirection," David observed. "The best way to hide involvement in it is to be the one who discovers the problem." Elizabeth's gaze was steady, analytical. "That's why I brought you in. I need someone who can be objective where I might be blind. If Robert is involved, we need to know." The conversation paused as David's phone vibrated with a text message. He checked it, his expression darkening slightly before returning to neutral. "Problem?" Elizabeth inquired. "Federal agents at my apartment. FBI specifically." Elizabeth straightened, immediately alert. How do you know? David held up his phone, showing a message from his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Castillo. Men in suits asking questions about you. Said they were FBI, showed badges. Sooner than I expected, Elizabeth admitted. But not surprising, the maintenance worker who single-handedly neutralized 3 trained operatives would naturally draw attention. David's mind raced through scenarios calculating risks and options. Lucy can't go back there. Not until I know what they want. Elizabeth nodded decisively. I have a company apartment in this building. Secure access, fully furnished, available immediately. It's yours for as long as necessary. She held his gaze, her offer extending beyond professional courtesy. Your past is resurfacing. David, you can run again, start over somewhere new. Or you can stand your ground with resources behind you. Nextset can provide legitimacy, protection, and purpose. The choice crystallized before him. Continue the cycle of disappearing and rebuilding, or establish a defensible position with institutional support. For 8 years, his instinct had been to remain invisible to protect Lucy through anonymity, but circumstances had forced his hand, pushing him back into the light. I'll need to collect some things from the apartment. Essential items only. Elizabeth nodded, understanding. Take my private elevator to the garage. My driver will take you anywhere you need to go. The company apartment will be ready when you return. As David rose to leave, Elizabeth added, the FBI's interest suggests something bigger than corporate espionage. Be careful, David. Some ghosts are better left undisturbed. The warning hung between them, an acknowledgement of dangers beyond the immediate threat, shadows from a past that both protected and endangered him. 40 minutes later, David approached his apartment building, cautiously surveying the street from the back seat of Elizabeth's company car. No federal vehicles visible, but that meant little. He instructed the driver to circle the block once more, identifying potential surveillance positions and escape routes, habits that had kept him alive through countless operations. When the car stopped a block away, David exited with practiced casualness, his posture and gait deliberately average, forgettable. He entered through the building's service entrance, avoiding the main lobby where Mrs. Castillo might be watching for his return. His apartment showed subtle signs of disturbance. The door frame with microscopic scratches indicating lock-picking tools, the corner of the hallway rug slightly turned up, the kitchen cabinet door not fully closed. Someone had conducted a search professional enough to avoid obvious disruption, but not perfect. David moved efficiently through the space, gathering only essentials. Lucy's favorite stuffed animal and sketchbooks, a backup tablet containing her schoolwork changes of clothes for both of them. From his hidden cache, he retrieved the metal case containing emergency funds and documentation, along with a small leather pouch that held the only photographs he possessed of Lucy's mother. As he collected these items, his senses remained hyper-alert for any sound indicating a return visit from federal agents. The apartment felt compromised, now the sanctuary he'd created for Lucy tainted by outside intrusion. 8 years of careful anonymity erased in less than 24 hours. A floor creaked in the hallway outside, someone approaching with deliberate stealth. David set down his duffel bag, positioning himself beside the door with clear sightlines to both entrance and fire escape. His body shifted automatically into combat readiness, weight balanced, muscles relaxed but prepared. The door opened slowly, revealing Special Agent Thomas Reeves. The FBI agent entered cautiously, weapon drawn, but pointed downward, alert but not overtly threatening. David Turner, or should I say Commander Turner. David remained still, assessing. You have questions, ask them. Reeves maintained a professional distance, clearly recognizing the potential threat despite David's civilian appearance. I'm Special Agent Thomas Reeves, FBI Counterterrorism Division. We need to talk about what happened at Sterling Tower last night and about why an operator with your particular skill set has been living off-grid for 8 years. David's expression revealed nothing. You entered my home without a warrant. That suggests this isn't an official investigation. Reeves holstered his weapon slowly, a calculated gesture of de-escalation. Let's just say certain agencies are very interested in your reappearance, Commander. Some people thought you were dead. Others suspected you'd gone dark intentionally. The question is why, and why resurface now? David moved to the living room window, positioning himself to monitor both the street below and the FBI agent. I'm a maintenance supervisor who protected a woman from assault. Everything else is speculation. Reeves smiled thinly. We both know that's not true. 3 men with military backgrounds were neutralized with techniques consistent with advanced close-quarters combat training. Multiple witnesses identified you as Phantom, a designation that officially doesn't exist but somehow sent ripples through several intelligence agencies when it hit the police report. David remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. Reeves continued moving carefully into the living room. Here's what concerns me, Commander. Operators with your background don't just retire to civilian life without authorization, especially not after the kind of missions you allegedly conducted. So either you're running from something or you're still operational, and last night was part of something bigger. David finally turned to face the agent directly. I have a daughter who needs me. Everything else is irrelevant. Reeves studied him with professional curiosity. The daughter is real. That surprised everyone who reviewed your file. The timing of her birth coincides with your disappearance from official records. Convenient cover or legitimate reason to vanish. My family is off limits. David's voice carried a quiet warning that made Reeves instinctively step back. Whatever questions you have, stay focused on me. The FBI agent nodded slowly, recalibrating his approach. Marcus Reed and his associates have connections to a cyber mercenary group that's been targeting critical infrastructure. Elizabeth Chen's company protects much of that infrastructure. Now you're suddenly working for her as security consultant. David's surprise must have registered briefly because Reeves smiled. We have sources inside NextSec. Corporate espionage intersects with national security when it involves protected systems. This new information shifted David's mental calculation. If the FBI already had someone inside NextSec, they might be tracking the same security breach Elizabeth had hired him to investigate. Or their source might be the very mole he was seeking. What do you want, Agent Reeves? The FBI agent maintained eye contact. Cooperation, whatever you're doing with Chen, whatever you know about Reed's organization, we want that information. In exchange, certain questions about your past and your current legal status remain unasked. David collected his duffel bag. Decision made. I'm a civilian security consultant helping a corporation enhance its defenses after an attempted kidnapping. Anything beyond that is classified at levels I suspect exceed your clearance. He moved toward the door, pausing beside Reeves. Tell whoever sent you that Phantom died 8 years ago in that IED blast. The man who stands before you is just trying to give his daughter a stable life. Reeves didn't attempt to stop him, but his parting words carried their own warning. They won't stop looking, Commander. And they have resources beyond what you might anticipate. Whatever game you're playing with Chen, be careful. Some operations have consequences that outlive their objectives. The cryptic warning bellowed David as he descended the stairs, bypassing the elevator that might trap him in a confined space. Reeves knew more than he should about operations that officially never happened, suggesting connections to agencies beyond the FBI, possibly the very forces David had been avoiding for 8 years. At NextSec headquarters, Lucy continued working with the animation software, completely absorbed in creating increasingly complex sequences. Her latest project showed a bird transforming into a butterfly, then into a dragon that soared between skyscrapers, reminiscent of Boston's skyline. The young developer watched in amazement, occasionally offering technical suggestions that Lucy incorporated with natural intuition. The security officer remained by the door, vigilant but unobtrusive. Elizabeth entered the lab, pausing to observe Lucy's work with genuine appreciation. That's extraordinary. You have a remarkable talent. Lucy beamed at the praise. Thank you. I'm trying to show how things can change, but still be beautiful. Elizabeth moved closer, studying the animation's details. Is that Sterling Tower? Lucy nodded, adding final touches to her creation. And that's where Daddy works now, right with you? A simple question that carried complex implications. Elizabeth chose her words carefully. Your father is helping us with some important security work. He has special skills that we need right now. Lucy continued, drawing her focus unwavering. I know. Daddy tries to hide it, but I've always known he was special. The way he moves sometimes, how he always notices everything. The nightmares that make him check my room 3 times before morning. The perceptiveness of this 9-year-old child struck Elizabeth forcefully. She'd underestimated how much Lucy might have observed and understood about her father's true nature. Does that frighten you? Elizabeth asked gently. Lucy shook her head, her expression serious beyond her years. Nothing about Daddy scares me. He's the safest person in the world. He just has secrets that make him sad sometimes. Elizabeth absorbed this insight, recognizing that Lucy Turner might be far more aware of her father's dual nature than David himself realized. The child had adapted to his hypervigilance, interpreted his protective instincts, recognized the burden he carried without fully understanding its source. Before Elizabeth could respond, David appeared at the lab entrance. His expression softened immediately upon seeing Lucy, the tension from his confrontation with Reeves momentarily displaced by paternal affection. Look what I made, Daddy, Lucy called, excitedly gesturing to her animation. David approached studying the detailed creation with evident pride. The dragon looks fierce but friendly at the same time. How did you manage that? Lucy explained her technique with enthusiasm, demonstrating how she'd programmed different sequences to blend together. David listened attentively, his focus entirely on his daughter, despite the weight of the day's developments. Elizabeth observed their interaction with new understanding. David Turner might have been a ghost in his former life, a shadow operative who moved through the world unseen. But as a father, he was fully present, engaged, and devoted. When Lucy finished her explanation, David knelt to her level. "We're going to stay somewhere new tonight, Luce. A special apartment here in this building." Lucy accepted this news without alarm, a resilience that spoke to previous disruptions, previous moves, previous adaptations to her father's necessary caution. "Is Mrs. Castillo watching Mr. Whiskers?" David nodded. "I packed your favorite sketchbooks and Cosmic Bear. The rest we can get later." Elizabeth watched this exchange with a mixture of admiration and concern. Lucy's easy acceptance of sudden change revealed a child accustomed to uncertainty, while David's careful attention to her emotional anchors, the stuffed animal, the artistic outlets, demonstrated a father determined to provide stability within chaos. The small family unit had developed its own ecosystem of support and understanding, a bond forged through shared adversity and mutual protection. Elizabeth recognized the strength in this connection, but also its vulnerability. David's reemergence from anonymity placed both him and Lucy at risk, creating exposure neither had experienced in 8 years of careful seclusion. As they prepared to leave for the company apartment, Elizabeth caught David's eye, communicating without words her understanding of the increased stakes. He nodded almost imperceptibly, acknowledging the shared responsibility they now carried, not just for national security or corporate interests, but for the well-being of a remarkable child caught in circumstances beyond her control. The Nexec corporate apartment occupied the entire 42nd floor of the headquarters building, a luxurious space designed for visiting executives and valuable clients. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, while state-of-the-art security systems protected the occupants from both physical and electronic intrusion. Lucy explored the space with excitement, claiming a bedroom with its own art desk positioned to capture the morning light. David conducted a thorough security assessment, checking sightlines, access points, surveillance coverage, and potential vulnerabilities. Habits so ingrained they required no conscious thought. Elizabeth observed his methodical inspection without comment, recognizing the professional assessment for what it was. When he finally turned to her, his expression had settled into focused determination. "Agent Reeves mentioned an FBI source inside NexSec. That complicates our investigation." Elizabeth absorbed this information with the calm pragmatism that had built her company. Another variable to consider could be someone on our suspect list or someone entirely different. David moved to the window, studying the harbor activity below. Whatever vulnerability Reed was targeting, whatever mole exists in your organizations, but it's part of something bigger. The FBI doesn't assign counterterrorism agents to corporate espionage cases. Elizabeth joined him at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "My security protocols protect 16 critical infrastructure sectors. In the wrong hands, they could facilitate the largest coordinated attack on American soil since 9/11. That definitely qualifies as counterterrorism territory." The scale of the threat crystallized between them, not just corporate sabotage, but potential national catastrophe. David's decision to step back into the shadows of his former life now carried implications beyond personal risk or professional challenge. The stakes had escalated to levels he hadn't navigated since his operational days, with one critical difference. Lucy stood at the center of his considerations, a vulnerability he'd never had to factor into mission parameters before. "Tomorrow I start interviewing your technical staff," David decided, "one by one in environments where they can't prepare or coordinate responses." Elizabeth nodded approval. "I'll arrange it through HR as standard security protocols following the Sterling Tower incident. No one will question the procedure." As they finalized these details, Lucy appeared from her new bedroom, sketchbook in hand. She'd drawn the view from her window, capturing not just the visual elements, but somehow the feeling of elevation, of being suspended above the city in a space both connected to and removed from the world below. David studied the drawing, recognizing in his daughter's artistic perspective something fundamental about their current situation. Balance between worlds visible, yet separate, part of society, yet distinct from it. The parallels weren't lost on him as he committed fully to the path before them, accepting both its dangers and its possibilities. Whatever happens, he resolved silently, Lucy would have the stability, security, and future he'd fought to provide since the day she was born, even if that meant embracing rather than fleeing the shadows of his past. Morning light filtered through the next-sec corporate apartment as David prepared for his first day of interviews. He'd risen at 5 a.m., completing a rigorous exercise routine that maintained the physical edge his former profession demanded. Now showered and dressed in the business casual attire Elizabeth had arranged, charcoal slacks and a navy button-down that concealed his athletic build without appearing deliberately understated, he reviewed his approach while Lucy slept peacefully in her room. The transition felt surreal. 24 hours ago, he'd been David Turner maintenance supervisor living in anonymity. Now he stood 42 floors above Boston, officially employed as a security consultant for one of America's premier cybersecurity firms, hunting a mole with access to critical infrastructure systems. The stakes dwarfed even some of his classified operations, yet this mission came with constraints his phantom days never imposed: a visible identity, organizational oversight, and most significantly, a daughter whose safety depended on his every decision. Elizabeth arrived at 7:30 a.m. with breakfast and coffee, already impeccably dressed in a tailored burgundy suit that projected authority while remaining practical for a day of executive meetings. We've scheduled your first 3 interviews for this morning. Robert first, followed by Diane Mercer and Kevin Phillips. Human Resources has positioned this as standard security protocol following the Sterling Tower incident. No one should suspect they're being specifically evaluated. David accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. I'll need a monitoring station set up in my office. Camera feeds covering the interview room from multiple angles, plus the subject's work areas and building entry points. Elizabeth tapped her tablet, sending instructions to the technical team. Done. Anything else? Access to their digital footprints, emails, messaging logs, keycard usage patterns. And I need eyes on their real-time reactions when you announce the discovery of the security vulnerability at this morning's all-hands meeting. She raised an eyebrow. I hadn't planned to make that announcement yet. David met her gaze directly. The mole already knows about the vulnerability. What we need is to observe who doesn't seem surprised, who's watching others instead of reacting themselves, who's manufacturing the appropriate response. Elizabeth considered this approach, mentally calculating risks against potential insights. It's aggressive, could push our target to accelerate their timeline. Sometimes the best way to identify a predator is to make it move, David countered. We need behavioral baselines under stress. Your announcement provides that catalyst. Their discussion paused as Lucy emerged from her bedroom, hair tousled from sleep, but eyes bright with curiosity. The child moved to the window, gazing out at the city awakening below, boats cutting white paths across the harbor waters. Do I get to see the design lab again today? Lucy's question held equal parts hope and uncertainty. The familiar routine of her life disrupted yet again, but this time with intriguing new possibilities rather than anonymous relocations. Elizabeth smiled warmly. Absolutely. Our development team was impressed with your animation work yesterday. They'd like your help testing some new features. Lucy brightened visibly, turning to her father for confirmation. Can I, Daddy? David crossed to her, brushing hair from her forehead with gentle fingers. Yes, but remember our rules. Stay with your assigned guide, don't wander alone. And if anything feels wrong, trust my instincts and find somewhere safe with lots of people. Lucy completed automatically the security protocol, clearly well rehearsed between them. David nodded approval before addressing Elizabeth. She needs school arrangements soon. Structure normalcy education. Elizabeth's expression softened momentarily, recognizing the parent beneath the operative. I've arranged a meeting with Brighton Academy's headmaster tomorrow morning. Their rolling admissions policy allows mid-semester enrollment, and their security protocols exceed even federal standards for protected persons. The reference to protected persons, diplomatic terminology for individuals under government security, wasn't lost on David. The classification acknowledged Lucy's potential vulnerability without explicitly stating that his enemies might target her to reach him. After breakfast, they descended to NextSec's executive level, the private elevator bypassing public floors for enhanced security. David settled into his office, activating the surveillance system Elizabeth had arranged. Multiple screens displayed camera feeds from key locations throughout the building, providing comprehensive coverage of personnel movements, security checkpoints, and the specially prepared interview room where he would evaluate suspects. Robert Chen arrived precisely at 900 a.m., his punctuality reflecting military precision rather than corporate promptness. Elizabeth's brother carried himself with the confident authority of someone accustomed to both technical expertise and organizational respect. His tailored suit and meticulously maintained appearance projected professional success, but the subtle tension in his movements suggested hypervigilance beneath the polished exterior. David greeted him with a firm handshake, assessing physical indicators, grip strength, palm temperature, eye contact patterns, while maintaining the neutral demeanor of a corporate security professional. Thank you for making time, Mr. Chen. As you know, we're conducting comprehensive security reviews following the incident at Sterling Tower. Robert settled into the offered chair, his posture casual yet controlled. Elizabeth mentioned you were former military, special forces. The question probed for confirmation of rumors undoubtedly circulating throughout NECSEC. David neither confirmed nor denied, redirecting smoothly. My background includes specialized security operations. Today, I'd like to discuss access protocols for the core security architecture, specifically who can authorize changes to fundamental code structures. The technical discussion that followed revealed Robert's extraordinary expertise and equally extraordinary ego. The CTO detailed elaborate safeguards built into NECSEC systems, emphasizing redundancies he'd personally designed to prevent unauthorized modifications. No single person can implement changes without multiple approval layers. Robert explained his confidence, absolute. I designed the authentication hierarchy myself after leaving the Pentagon. It's modeled on nuclear launch protocols, distributed authority requiring consensus before execution. David noted the pride underlying this statement, the architect describing his masterpiece, while probing for vulnerabilities. Yet someone managed to insert a backdoor into the system. How would that be possible given these safeguards? Robert's expression tightened imperceptibly, professional pride wounded by the implication. It wouldn't be, unless multiple senior staff were compromised, or unless he paused considering the implications before continuing. Unless someone found a pathway I hadn't anticipated. A theoretical vulnerability I've been researching involves quantum computing exploitation of our encryption standards, but that's beyond current technological capabilities outside of perhaps 3 government agencies. David observed Robert's micro-expressions during this explanation, the slight furrow between his brows, the infinitesimal pause before mentioning government agencies, the controlled breathing pattern of someone consciously managing stress indicators. Nothing definitively suspicious, but nothing that eliminated him as a suspect either. Their conversation continued for 40 minutes. David methodically exploring Robert's knowledge of the system architecture, his relationships with team members, his awareness of potential external threats. Throughout, Robert maintained composure and cooperation, though his responses to questions about Elizabeth occasionally revealed complicated sibling dynamics. Respect mingled with competitive tension. After Robert departed, David reviewed the recorded session, noting behavioral patterns for comparative analysis against subsequent interviews. The CTO remained a viable suspect. He possessed the necessary expertise, access, and potentially the government connections implied by his Pentagon background. Yet his genuine concern about the security breach seemed authentic, suggesting either remarkable deception skills or actual innocence. Diane Mercer arrived next, her nervous energy immediately apparent in rapid speech patterns and excessive hand gestures. The senior developer's recent divorce had left visible marks. Significant weight loss, dark circles beneath her eyes, a wedding ring tan line still visible on her left hand. Her financial distress following the settlement created classic vulnerability for recruitment by hostile entities. Opportunity and motivation forming 2 pillars of the traditional insider threat assessment. During their conversation, David observed Diane's reactions to key topics, particularly her relationship with Robert Chen and her access to core security protocols. Her technical expertise was evident, though narrower than Robert's comprehensive understanding. More revealing were her emotional responses to questions about team dynamics, flashes of resentment when discussing Robert's management style, nervous fidgeting when asked about recent changes to access permissions. I was removed from the final implementation team 3 weeks ago. Diane admitted bitterness seeping through professional restraint. Robert claimed it was due to performance concerns following my divorce, but I've never received negative reviews until recently. David noted this potential motive. A disgruntled employee excluded from high-profile work might seek retribution. But Diane's technical responses suggested she lacked the sophisticated expertise required to implant the backdoor undetected. She remained on his suspect list, but with reduced priority. Kevin Phillips proved the most intriguing subject, arriving 15 minutes late with disheveled appearance and distracted manner. The senior network engineer had reputation for brilliance, counterbalanced by social awkwardness. But David immediately recognized something beyond mere eccentricity in his behavior. Phillips exhibited classic signs of someone under extreme stress: pupil dilation, perspiration, patterns, voice modulation, inconsistencies, and most tellingly, selective attention failures during technical questions that should have been routine for someone with his expertise. "I've been working on peripheral systems recently," Kevin explained when asked about recent changes to core security protocols. "Mostly international client deployments, not the domestic infrastructure implementations." The deflection technique was subtle but recognizable to anyone trained in interrogation, answering adjacent to the question rather than addressing it directly. David pressed further, observing Kevin's physiological responses to increased pressure. "Yet your access logs show you reviewed the core architecture multiple times last month, often during off hours." Standard procedure. Kevin's right hand twitched slightly, a tell indicating preparation for deception. Security audits. Robert assigned them randomly to ensure compliance verification wasn't predictable. Plausible explanation, though. David noted the lack of eye contact during delivery. He shifted topics abruptly, a technique designed to prevent rehearsed responses. "Your financial records show 3 large deposits to your Cayman account within the past 60 days. Consulting work. The question, based on information Elizabeth had provided from NextSec's enhanced background checks, visibly startled Kevin, his composure fracturing momentarily before he recovered. "Family inheritance. My uncle passed in March." David made a note to verify this claim, though his instincts already flagged it as likely false. Throughout their conversation, Kevin's behavior indicated significantly elevated risk factors compared to previous interviewees: financial anomalies, access pattern irregularities, and most concerning, sophisticated deception techniques beyond typical civilian capacity. By mid-afternoon, David had completed 5 interviews, each carefully documented and analyzed against behavioral baselines. He was reviewing comparative data when Elizabeth entered his office, her expression revealing tension beneath professional composure. "Robert tracked me down after his interview." Elizabeth began closing the door behind her. "He's not happy about being subjected to what he called amateur interrogation techniques by a glorified bodyguard with delusions of investigative authority." David continued analyzing the surveillance footage, unsurprised by this development. "Your brother feels threatened. That's useful information." Elizabeth sighed, settling into the chair opposite his desk. "Robert has always been sensitive about his domain. When we started NextSec, he insisted on complete autonomy over security architecture design. I've respected that boundary perhaps too much." David turned from his monitors, giving Elizabeth his full attention. "That arrangement creates perfect conditions for insider exploitation. Critical systems need oversight redundancy, especially when national infrastructure is involved." Elizabeth nodded, acknowledging this vulnerability. The company's rapid growth from boutique security firm to national infrastructure guardian had outpaced its governance evolution. "That's part of why I brought you in. We need external perspective, unconstrained by organizational politics or familial loyalty." The admission that even her brother remained on her suspect list revealed Elizabeth's commitment to addressing the threat regardless of personal cost. David recognized the weight of this position, having made similar calculations during operations where mission requirements superseded personal relationships. Their conversation paused as David's phone chimed with a security alert. Lucy's monitoring bracelet, disguised as a fitness tracker but containing sophisticated location and biometric sensors, indicated elevated heart rate and rapid movement. He accessed the NextSec security system, immediately locating her position in the design lab corridor, moving quickly toward the emergency stairwell, accompanied by her assigned security officer. David activated the communication channel. Status report. The security officer's response came immediately, professional but urgent. Protocol Amber. Unidentified individual attempted contact with the principal. Proceeding to secure location Delta. Protocol Amber. Their predetermined code for potential surveillance or approach by unknown persons, not immediate danger but requiring precautionary measures. Location Delta, the designated safe room on the executive floor where Lucy could be protected while threats were assessed. Elizabeth was already accessing building security systems, reviewing camera footage from the design lab corridor. There, Male subject, approximately 40, business attire, attempted to approach Lucy while her escort was speaking with the lab director. Security intervened before contact was made. David studied the footage, focusing on the unknown man's movements and positioning. The deliberate interception path, the calculated timing, the professional awareness of camera angles. Not random, not opportunistic. This was surveillance verification. Confirmation of Lucy's location and protection protocols by someone with tactical training. The significance of this development settled between them. Someone had identified Lucy as a pressure point, a potential vulnerability to exploit. The question was whether this represented an isolated incident or coordinated targeting. Elizabeth's expression hardened with determination. I'm implementing additional security measures for Lucy immediately. Dedicated protective detail, restricted building access to essential personnel only, and accelerated enrollment at Brighton Academy, where she'll have specialized security integration. David nodded approval while continuing to analyze the footage, searching for identifying features or behavioral indicators that might connect this individual to known operatives. The tactical approach suggested military or intelligence background, aligning with his suspicions that government elements might be monitoring his reemergence from anonymity. As Lucy was secured in the executive floor safe room, David and Elizabeth reviewed security protocols implementing enhanced measures throughout the building. The incident had elevated the investigation's urgency. If Lucy was being targeted, the timeline for identifying and neutralizing the security breach had contracted significantly. By evening, Lucy had been safely transferred to the corporate apartment under additional protection, the day's events explained as a simple security drill rather than actual concern. David maintained outward calm for his daughter's benefit while inwardly recalibrating threat assessments and response options. As Lucy settled with her sketchbook near the windows, now treated with specialized security film, rendering them bulletproof and anti-surveillance, David conferred with Elizabeth in the apartment's secure communication room. The space featured comprehensive countermeasures against electronic eavesdropping, allowing candid discussion of sensitive developments. Kevin Phillips is our most likely candidate based on behavioral indicators and financial anomalies. David began displaying analytical summaries on the secure terminal. But today's approach to Lucy suggests involvement beyond corporate espionage. This has hallmarks of professional intelligence operation. Elizabeth processed this assessment, connecting implications to broader security concerns. If we're dealing with state actors rather than criminal organizations, the threat matrix changes significantly. David nodded agreement, adjusting parameters on his analysis model. Phillips' background shows 3 years at Technion Institute in Israel before joining NextSec. Potential recruitment window for foreign intelligence services. Elizabeth frowned thoughtfully. We vetted him thoroughly, including counterintelligence screening. Nothing flagged in background checks. Professional intelligence services can create covers that withstand standard corporate vetting, David countered. Even enhanced procedures miss sophisticated legends established with government resources. The discussion continued as they evaluated potential connections between Kevin Phillips, the security vulnerability, and the approach to Lucy, developing theory that the events might represent coordinated efforts by a foreign intelligence service to compromise American infrastructure through NextSec's protection systems, while simultaneously establishing leverage against David to prevent his interference. Their analysis was interrupted by a security alert. Kevin Phillips had just accessed the building using his credentials despite having departed 4 hours earlier. The timing, 9:37 p.m., well outside normal business hours, immediately triggered enhanced monitoring protocols. David accessed the security camera network tracking Phillips' movement through the building. The engineer bypassed his usual workspace, taking the restricted elevator directly to the server floor housing NextSec's most critical systems. His movements displayed purpose and urgency, suggesting operation execution rather than routine work. Elizabeth activated emergency protocols implementing passive surveillance without alerting Phillips to their awareness. We need to understand his objective before intervening. If he's uploading the final component of the back door, we need technical evidence for prosecution. David concurred with this approach, though his instincts pushed toward immediate intervention. The calculated risk, allowing potential damage to gather evidence, represented the difference between his former operational parameters and current corporate constraints. In his previous life, he would have neutralized the threat immediately. Now, legal considerations and prosecution requirements shape tactical decisions. They observed as Phillips entered the restricted server room, using apparently legitimate credentials proceeding directly to a specific server bank containing NextSec's core security architecture. His actions displayed professional efficiency, connecting a specialized device to the system, bypassing standard monitoring alerts through expertly applied countermeasures, and initiating what appeared to be data transmission to an external location. Evidence secured, David concluded, already moving toward the door. Elizabeth locked down the building. All exits, all communications. I'm taking him now. Elizabeth initiated the security protocols with swift keystrokes, sealing the building and activating enhanced monitoring throughout all systems. Be careful. If he's agency-backed, he'll have contingencies and possibly defensive training. David moved through the executive floor toward the emergency stairwell, bypassing elevators that might alert Phillips to his approach. His body automatically shifted into operational mode. Movement patterns optimized for speed and silent senses heightened to environmental details, mind-calculating approach vectors and neutralization options with practiced precision. Descending 12 flights to the server level, David emerged silently into the corridor leading to the secured server room. The space featured redundant security measures. Biometric scanners reinforced doors' continuous surveillance. Yet Phillips had navigated these defenses without triggering alarms, confirming sophisticated preparation and inside knowledge. Through the server room's glass wall, David observed Phillips completing his operation, disconnecting the specialized device and preparing to depart. The engineer's movements displayed professional thoroughness, wiping surfaces, touch restoring systems to their original configuration, implementing countermeasures against detection, further evidence of training beyond civilian information technology expertise. David positioned himself beside the server room door, calculating interception timing as Phillips approached the exit. The moment the engineer cleared the doorway, David executed a precise neutralization sequence, controlling Phillips' dominant arm to prevent weapon access, applying momentary tracheal pressure to disorient without causing permanent damage, and completing the takedown with a controlled transition to restraint position that immobilized without injury. The entire sequence required less than 4 seconds. Phillips subdued and secured before he registered the threat. The engineer's expression reflected not fear but professional recognition, acknowledgement of superior tactical execution rather than civilian panic. "You're him," Phillips stated flatly, no question in his tone. "The ghost who came back from the dead." David secured Phillips' hands with specialized restraints from his tactical belt, conducting efficient search that revealed expected tools: encrypted communication device, specialized data transfer hardware, authentication bypass equipment, confirming operational rather than criminal profile. Elizabeth arrived with security personnel, maintaining professional command presence despite the tension evident in her posture. The server room is secured. Technical team is assessing what he accessed and potentially compromised. Phillips remained unnaturally calm for someone facing industrial espionage charges that carried significant federal penalties. His composure suggested confidence in protection or extraction, hallmarks of state-sponsored operative rather than financial opportunist. As security personnel secured the area, David conducted preliminary interrogation, evaluating Phillips' responses against behavioral baselines established during their earlier interview. The engineer's demeanor had transformed completely. The nervous awkwardness replaced by controlled professionalism, the scattered focus now laser-sharp situational awareness. "You're making a significant miscalculation," Phillips stated calmly. "This operation has protection at levels beyond your clearance, even with your particular background. One call from me and this ends with you in federal custody instead of me." David observed these claims without reaction, noting specific phraseology consistent with intelligence community vernacular. The reference to clearance levels and federal intervention aligned with his suspicion that Phillips operated with government sanction, though which government remained unclear. Elizabeth directed the security team to escort Phillips to the building's secure holding room, a reinforced space designed for containing threats until law enforcement arrival. As the engineer was removed, his parting statement carried calculated warning: "She'll never be safe as long as you're involved in this, Turner. Some ghosts should stay buried." The direct reference to Lucy, implicit but unmistakable, confirmed David's assessment that Phillips's operation extended beyond technical compromise into personal leverage. The threat crystallized his determination while simultaneously introducing paternal fear into tactical calculations, a vulnerability he'd never navigated during his operational career. With Phillips contained, David and Elizabeth proceeded to the server room, where NextSec's technical team conducted emergency assessment of the engineer's activities. The preliminary findings proved concerning. Philips had implemented sophisticated access protocol that would allow remote control of 16 critical infrastructure systems nationwide, creating potential for coordinated attack against power grids, water treatment facilities, air traffic control systems, and nuclear plant safety mechanisms. The architecture is brilliant, the lead security analyst explained, displaying technical diagrams on monitoring screens. He created a distributed command structure that appears legitimate within each individual system, but collectively forms a coordinated attack vector when activated by specific trigger sequence. Elizabeth studied the technical analysis with growing alarm. Potential casualty estimates if all systems were compromised simultaneously. The analyst hesitated before responding. Conservative models suggest hundreds of thousands initially, with cascading effects potentially reaching millions depending on timing and duration. The scale of the threat had transformed their understanding of the operation. This wasn't merely corporate espionage or even conventional cyberterrorism, but potential mass casualty attack vector disguised as system vulnerability. The implications elevated the situation from criminal investigation to national security crisis. Elizabeth initiated secure communications with federal authorities, activating pre-established protocols for critical infrastructure threats. David continued interrogating Philips while technical teams implemented emergency countermeasures to isolate and neutralize the implanted vulnerabilities before they could be activated. Philips maintained professional detachment during questioning, revealing nothing beyond cryptic warnings and occasional technical details apparently calculated to demonstrate the sophistication of his operation rather than provide actionable intelligence. His behavior reinforced David's assessment of intelligence community training, specifically resistance to interrogation techniques and information control protocols consistent with specialized preparation. The breakthrough came unexpectedly at 3:17 a.m., not through Philips, but through Lucy. David had briefly returned to the corporate apartment to check on his daughter, finding her awake and drawing intensely despite the late hour. Her sketchbook displayed meticulously detailed rendering of Kevin Phillips, captured from their brief encounter in the design lab corridor, with extraordinary accuracy that revealed her exceptional observational capabilities. Lucy pointed to specific details in her drawing: a distinctive scar partially visible beneath Phillips' shirt collar, a particular pattern in his iris coloration, the slight asymmetry in his facial structure. "I noticed something strange about him, Daddy. He watched me like you do, seeing everything, missing nothing. And his eyes look just like your friend, Captain Reynolds, from that old photo you keep." The observation struck David with revelation force. Captain Michael Reynolds, naval intelligence officer who had recruited David for specialized operations nearly 15 years earlier, before the formation of the Shadow Unit that became his operational identity. Reynolds had distinctive heterochromia, sectoral variation in his right iris, creating unique coloration pattern that Lucy had apparently observed in Phillips, despite their brief encounter. The connection catalyzed reassessment of Phillips' possible affiliations. Not foreign intelligence as initially suspected, but potentially domestic operation, specifically naval intelligence, or associated covert programs that might have inherited the specialized unit David had abandoned 8 years earlier. David returned to the secure holding room with renewed focus, approaching Phillips from entirely different perspective. "Captain Reynolds sends his regards," David stated calmly, watching Phillips's micro-expressions for confirmation. The engineer's pupil dilation and momentary freeze response confirmed the connection before he recovered professional composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." David leaned closer, voice lowered for privacy despite the monitoring systems. "We both know that's not true. Naval intelligence doesn't sacrifice assets without extraction plans. What's the real operation here, Kevin? Or is that even your name?" The calculated reference to extraction protocols, standard procedure for compromised intelligence assets, triggered visible reassessment in Phillips' demeanor. His gaze sharpened with new calculation, evaluating David not as corporate security, but as former operative who understood the operational landscape they both inhabited. After measured silence, Phillips responded with careful precision. "The systems were already compromised before I arrived. My mission was identification and verification, not implementation. Someone else created the vulnerability. I was tasked with confirming its existence and potential application." David processed this claim against available evidence. If true, it suggested counterintelligence operation rather than offensive action. Naval intelligence monitoring critical infrastructure vulnerabilities rather than creating them. That narrative aligned with standard national security protocols, but contradicted the financial evidence in Phillips' direct actions in the server room. Then who is behind the original compromise, David pressed, maintaining eye contact to evaluate truthfulness indicators? Phillips' expression revealed genuine uncertainty beneath professional control. That's what we've been trying to determine. The architecture signature suggests foreign development, but implementation required internal access at highest levels. The implication returned focus to Robert Chen, the only individual with sufficient system access and technical expertise to implement such sophisticated compromise without detection through standard security protocols. If Phillips' claim proved accurate, Robert's Pentagon background created concerning scenario: potential recruitment by foreign intelligence using existing government connections as cover and access mechanism. Elizabeth rejoined them, having completed secure communication with federal authorities. FBI Counterintelligence Division is 20 minutes out. Department of Homeland Security has implemented isolation protocols for all 16 affected infrastructure systems as precaution against activation. Phillips straightened at this information professional demeanor, shifting subtly toward cooperation rather than resistance. If DHS is isolating the systems, you need to know the trigger mechanism isn't time-based. It's designed to activate when isolation attempts are detected, specifically when all 16 systems implement emergency protocols simultaneously. The warning, delivered with urgent authenticity that registered as genuine in David's assessment, transformed their understanding of the immediate threat. Elizabeth immediately contacted federal authorities to halt the coordinated isolation, while David pressed Phillips for additional details needed to safely neutralize the activation protocols. Their conversation was interrupted by security alerts throughout the building, all systems suddenly registering multiple access attempts from external sources, systematic probing of defenses suggesting coordinated cyber attack. Simultaneously, perimeter sensors detected physical approach vectors, multiple vehicles converging on the building from different directions with tactical positioning, consistent with professional containment operation. Phillips assessed these developments with resigned recognition. Contingency response. My surveillance window expired without confirmation transmission. They've initiated extraction protocol combined with evidence elimination procedures. Elizabeth accessed security monitoring systems, confirming the assessment as surveillance footage showed tactically equipped teams approaching NextSec's building from multiple angles, their movement patterns and equipment suggesting professional military or intelligence operation rather than criminal assault. The scenario crystallized with disturbing clarity. They faced coordinated attack designed to extract Phillips and eliminate evidence of the infrastructure vulnerability before federal authorities arrived. The operation's sophistication and resources confirmed government involvement rather than criminal enterprise, though whether domestic rogue element or foreign intelligence remained unclear. Elizabeth activated NextSec's emergency defense systems, reinforced security barriers, signal jamming countermeasures, and automated protocols to preserve critical data against both cyber and physical attacks. David's mind shifted fully into tactical assessment, evaluating defense options against professional assault team, while prioritizing Lucy's security above all other considerations. We need to move her immediately, David stated, already moving toward the executive elevator that would provide direct access to the corporate apartment. The containment team will have identified all building occupants, including Lucy. Standard protocol puts civilians first in any extraction sequence. Elizabeth nodded understanding, accessing building systems to create evacuation path while maintaining perimeter defenses to delay the approaching teams. Take her through the subsurface maintenance tunnel. It connects to adjacent building with separate security system and exit point 2 blocks east. Vehicle waiting at emergency coordinates. As David entered the emergency stairwell, his phone vibrated with encrypted message. Authentication sequence he hadn't seen in 8 years from communication system that supposedly no longer existed. The message contained only coordinates and time windows signed with single letter that carried unmistakable significance, M. The initial from his former handler, the individual who had orchestrated his extraction and disappearance 8 years earlier, offering extraction coordinates in current crisis. The communication's timing and authentication suggested monitoring of his current situation and deployed resources prepared to assist. Remnants of the shadow organization he'd once served apparently still operational, despite official dissolution. David reached the corporate apartment to find Lucy already awake and dressed, her essential belongings packed in small backpack. Evidence of her practiced adaptation to emergency relocations throughout her young life. The security officer assigned to her protection maintained professional alertness, weapon ready, but concealed to avoid frightening the child. "Time to go on an adventure, Luce," David explained calmly, concealing the urgency driving his movements. "Remember our special game for unexpected trips?" Lucy nodded solemnly, her expression reflecting understanding beyond her years. Quiet as mice, quick as rabbits, smart as foxes. The simple phrase, "their established protocol for emergency evacuation," activated practice behavior patterns that transformed the 9-year-old from potential vulnerability to cooperative partner, her movements becoming deliberate and efficient as she followed David's lead without question or hesitation. They proceeded to the maintenance access panel. Elizabeth had indicated the security officer maintaining protective formation as they descended into the utility tunnels beneath NextSec's headquarters. Above them, building sensors reported breach at multiple entry points. The tactical teams had penetrated outer defenses and were methodically sweeping each floor with professional efficiency. David guided Lucy through the dimly lit concrete passageway, his senses hyper-alert to potential threats, while maintaining reassuring calm for his daughter's benefit. The tunnel extended nearly 2 blocks, eventually connecting to adjacent office building through emergency access panel designed for utility worker movement during crisis situations. As they navigated this escape route, David evaluated options against the encrypted coordinates he'd received. Potential extraction point operated by unknown elements from his past versus Elizabeth's arranged security vehicle. The decision balanced operational security against personal trust, fundamental calculation that had defined his professional existence before Lucy became his priority. The maintenance tunnel ended at access ladder leading to utility room in the adjacent building's subsurface level. David assisted Lucy upward, the security officer maintaining rearguard position against potential pursuit. They emerged into conventional office building with standard overnight security, civilian environment offering anonymity among normal business operations rather than specialized protection. David guided them through empty corridors towards service exit. Elizabeth had designated his tactical awareness, noting surveillance camera positions, security personnel locations, and potential choke points with automatic assessment developed through years of covert operations. Lucy matched his pace without complaint, her practiced response to crisis situations reflecting lifetime of preparedness for precisely these scenarios. They reached the designated exit point without incident, emerging onto Side Street, 2 blocks east of NextSec headquarters, where unmarked black SUV idled precisely at arranged coordinates. The vehicle's driver, female, approximately 30, professional posture suggesting specialized training, watched their approach with alert assessment rather than civilian curiosity. As they neared the vehicle, David detected subtle indicators that triggered immediate caution. Driver's hand position, suggesting concealed weapon readiness, engine running at specific RPM, indicating tactical preparedness, rather than casual idling, tinted windows, potentially concealing additional personnel within the vehicle. Simultaneously, his phone vibrated with second encrypted message. Updated coordinates 3 blocks north, authentication code confirming trusted source, rather than potential interception or manipulation. The competing extraction options required immediate decision with Lucy's safety as paramount consideration. David's training processed environmental variables, threat assessment, and tactical options with practiced efficiency that translated complex calculation into decisive action. He guided Lucy past the SUV without acknowledgement, maintaining casual pace while communicating situation update to the security officer through predetermined hand signal, indicating potential threat. The driver's reaction confirmed his suspicions. Immediate communication into concealed microphone, followed by engine adjustment suggesting imminent pursuit rather than continued waiting. David led Lucy around the corner onto busier street with late-night pedestrian traffic providing cover among civilian activity, their pace quickening without drawing attention among scattered bar patrons and service workers ending late shifts. 3 blocks north, at precisely the coordinates indicated in the encrypted message, black sedan with diplomatic plates waited at designated extraction point. The vehicle's particular configuration, specially modified Cadillac with reinforced frame and ballistic glass, matched transportation protocols from David's former operational unit, suggesting legitimate connection to his past rather than deception or trap. The driver's window lowered as they approached, revealing face David hadn't seen in 8 years. Michael Reynolds, naval intelligence officer, who had recruited him initially and later facilitated his disappearance following the IED incident that officially ended Phantom's existence. Time to come in from the cold, Commander Reynolds stated simply. Rear door opening with pneumatic precision to reveal secure transport compartment. Lucy first, then you. The security officer accompanying them maintained protective stance, weapon, now visible as potential pursuers approached from multiple angles. The SUV driver coordinating with additional personnel emerging from surrounding positions in tactical containment pattern designed to prevent escape. David made final calculation, balancing known variables against uncertain alternatives, then guided Lucy into the diplomatic vehicle with gentle urgency that conveyed importance without triggering fear. Get in, Luce. This is an old friend who's going to help us. Lucy complied immediately, her trust in her father's judgment absolute, despite the unusual circumstances. David followed her into the vehicle, the security officer covering their entry before joining them in the specialized transport designed for personnel extraction from compromised positions. As Reynolds accelerated away from the converging containment team, diplomatic plates and vehicle designation providing passage without interference, David settled beside Lucy with protective arm around her shoulders. Her small body remained calm against his side, resilience built through years of preparation for situations she couldn't fully understand but had been trained to navigate. Where are we going? Lucy's question held curiosity without fear, her exceptional adaptability once again surfacing in crisis. David exchanged glances with Reynolds before answering with careful honesty tailored to his daughter's understanding. To meet some people who knew me a long time ago. People who might help us understand what's happening and keep us safe. As diplomatic immunity carried them through Boston's nighttime streets toward unknown destination, David recognized fundamental transformation in his circumstances. The careful separation between his former life and present identity had collapsed completely, drawing Lucy into a world he'd abandoned before her birth. The boundaries between David Turner and Phantom had dissolved, creating an uncertain future that required integration rather than division of his compartmentalized existences. The weight of this transformation settled upon him with both relief and apprehension. Relief that resources from his operational past might now protect Lucy rather than threaten her, apprehension about introducing his daughter to shadows he'd kept hidden throughout her young life. The path forward remained unclear, but the immediate crisis had created momentum toward resolution. Confronting his past rather than evading it, addressing threats directly rather than through perpetual evasion. As the diplomatic vehicle carried them beyond city limits towards secured facility where answers might await, David held Lucy close with silent promise that transcended operational parameters or professional obligations. Whatever came next would be navigated with her well-being as non-negotiable priority. The oath that had guided him since abandoning Phantom's existence for fatherhood's greater purpose.